I've always been the responsible one in my family, the one who remembers to send flowers when someone's sick, who brings homemade desserts to every gathering, and who stays late to help stack chairs and wash dishes. But somewhere along the way, being reliable became being invisible. I wasn't the troublemaker, like my younger brother Jake, who could charm his way out of any situation with a crooked smile and a half-hearted apology. I wasn't the golden child like my older sister Carmen, who seemed to glide through life collecting achievements and admiration in equal measure. I was just Maya, steady, dependable Maya who would always be there when you needed her, even if you forgot to include her when you didn't. Hey everyone. If you're enjoying this story about family dynamics and standing up for yourself, make sure to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Also, don't forget to share this with someone who might need to hear it. Sometimes we all need a reminder that our worth isn't determined by how others treat us. The pattern had been building for years, so gradually that I almost didn't notice it happening. Group texts that somehow never included my number. Weekend plans discussed in front of me as if I were a piece of furniture. Holiday photos where I'd been strategically cropped out, even though I'd been standing right there when they were taken. Each incident was small enough to explain away. An oversight, a technical glitch, a simple mistake, but taken together, they painted a picture I was finally ready to see. It all came to a head at my nephew Tyler's 8th birthday party last month. Tyler is Carmen's son, and he's always been special to me. Maybe because he reminds me of myself at that age. A little too observant, a little too sensitive, always trying to make everyone else happy. I'd spent 2 weeks planning the perfect gift for him. A custom skateboard with artwork based on his favorite video game character, something I'd commissioned from a local artist. The party was at Carmen's house, a beautiful suburban home with a perfectly manicured backyard and one of those above-ground pools that cost more than most people's cars. I arrived early, as usual, to help set up. Carmen was rushing around, stressed about the decorations not being quite right. Worried that the weather might turn, fretting over whether she'd ordered enough pizza. I did what I always do. I stepped in. I hung streamers, arranged chairs, set up the gift table, and even ran to the store when she realized she'd forgotten to buy napkins. The party went well. Tyler loved his skateboard, and I spent most of the afternoon teaching him basic balance techniques on the grass, while the other adults clustered around the pool, drinks in hand, talking about things I wasn't quite invited into. It felt normal, in that particular way that had become my normal. Present but peripheral, helpful but hardly noticed. As the afternoon wound down and other parents started collecting their sugar-crashed children and heading home, I found myself in Carmen's kitchen, loading dirty plates into the dishwasher, while she scrolled through the photos on her phone, already planning her social media posts. My mom was wiping down counters, and my Aunt Linda was packing up leftover cake. This was such a success, Mom said, looking genuinely pleased. Tyler had such a good time. He really did. I agreed, genuinely happy. I love seeing him so excited about something. That's when I made the comment that changed everything. I was thinking about the family barbecue that happens every summer at my parents' lake cabin. A tradition that goes back to my childhood, where all the extended family comes together for a long weekend of swimming, hiking, and catching up. It's always been one of my favorite times of the year. I can't wait for the big family reunion next weekend, I said, drying a serving spoon. It's been such a crazy year for everyone. It'll be nice to finally all be together and really catch up. The kitchen went quiet in a way that made my skin prickle. I looked up from the dish I was washing to find 3 pairs of eyes staring at me with expressions I couldn't quite read. Confusion? Embarrassment? Something worse? Aunt Linda was the first to speak. "Honey," she said carefully, "that was last weekend." The words hit me like cold water. "What?" Carmen looked up from her phone, her face a mixture of guilt and annoyance. "The reunion was last Saturday. Dad's been planning it for months." I felt something hollow open up in my chest. "But no one told me." "We thought you knew," Mom said quickly, but her voice lacked conviction. It was in the family group chat. What family group chat? I asked, my voice smaller than I intended. The silence that followed was deafening. Carmen and Aunt Linda exchanged a look, one of those loaded glances that carries an entire conversation. Mom busied herself with wiping down an already clean counter. "Show me," I said quietly. Carmen hesitated, then reluctantly pulled up her phone. She scrolled through to a group chat called Lake Reunion 2024 and turned the screen toward me. There were dozens of messages, planning details, menu discussions, arrival times, excitement about seeing everyone. The last message was from yesterday. "Thanks for such an amazing weekend, everyone. Can't wait for next year." I scrolled up through the messages, my heart sinking further with each one. There were photos from the planning stages, screenshots of funny memes shared while they coordinated, inside jokes about Uncle Pete's terrible fishing skills, and Grandma's famous potato salad recipe. A whole conversation, a whole experience, a whole weekend of my family's life that had happened completely without me. "How long has this chat existed?" I asked, still staring at the screen. "Since March," Carmen said quietly. 5 months. They'd been planning this for 5 months, and no one had thought to include me. Or worse, they had thought about it and decided not to. I handed the phone back to Carmen and returned to washing dishes, my hands moving mechanically while my mind raced. The water was too hot, but I didn't adjust it. The physical discomfort felt appropriate somehow, like a small punishment for being naive enough to still expect inclusion. "Maya," Mom started. "It wasn't intentional. You know how these things happen. People create group chats and forget who's in them and who isn't." I turned to look at her. 23 people were in that chat, Mom. 23 family members, and somehow I was the only one who got forgotten. "Don't be dramatic," Carmen said, her tone sharp with defensiveness. "It's just a group chat." "And the reunion itself?" I asked. "Was that also just an oversight?" The question hung in the air. No one answered, because we all knew the truth. It hadn't been an oversight, it had been a choice. I finished the last plate, dried my hands on a dish towel, and picked up my purse. "I should go," I said. "Tyler's probably tired." As I headed toward the front door to say goodbye to my nephew, I heard Carmen muttered Aunt Linda. "She always makes everything about her." I paused at the doorway, my hand on the handle. For just a moment, I considered turning around, considered confronting her, considered demanding an explanation or an apology, or at least an acknowledgement of how hurtful this all was. But I didn't. Instead, I did what I'd always done. I swallowed the pain, put on a smile, and left quietly. But as I drove home that evening, something was different. The hurt was still there, sharp and immediate, but underneath it was something else, something that felt like the first stirrings of an idea. For years, I'd been playing by their rules, accepting their version of normal, believing that if I just tried harder, gave more, stayed quieter, eventually I'd earn my place back. But what if I stopped trying? What if, instead of begging for inclusion, I started building something they couldn't exclude me from? What if I stopped being the family doormat and started being the family landlord? The idea was just a whisper then, barely formed. But as I pulled into my driveway and sat in the dark car for a moment longer than necessary, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: power. Not the kind that comes from anger or revenge, but the kind that comes from finally understanding that you have choices. I just didn't know yet how far I was willing to go to make them. The next morning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. Not the desperate, grasping clarity of someone trying to fix something broken, but the cool, analytical clarity of someone ready to assess the damage and make decisions based on facts rather than hope. I made coffee and sat at my kitchen table with a legal pad, doing something I'd never done before. I made a list. Not a list of grievances or complaints, but a list of facts. Cold, hard, documented facts about my relationship with my family. At the top of the page, I wrote, "Financial support provided, 2019 to 2024. What followed was a longer list than I'd expected. There was the $15,000 I'd quietly funneled to my parents when Dad's small business nearly went under during the pandemic. I'd structured it as a quote-to-quote storeway loan that everyone understood would never actually be repaid. There was the $8,000 I'd contributed to Tyler's college fund, money I'd been setting aside monthly since he was born. The $3,000 for Jake's car repairs last year when his transmission died and he couldn't afford to fix it. The countless smaller amounts, Carmen's emergency dental work, Mom's prescription costs when her insurance lapsed, the new roof for my parents, house that I'd helped finance through what I'd called early inheritance. None of them knew exactly how much I'd contributed to their stability. I'd been careful about that, structuring things through my business accounts, using my financial planning background to make everything look like coincidence or luck, rather than charity. I'd told myself I was protecting their pride. Now I realized I'd been protecting their ability to take me for granted. The second list was harder to write. Social exclusions, 2021 to 2024. Christmas Eve dinner at Carmen's, that I only found out about through Jake's Instagram story. The baby shower for my cousin Melissa, where I'd been deliberately left off the invitation list because, as I later learned, Maya always makes things awkward with her questions about why we don't see each other more. The family vacation to the mountains last summer, where they'd all gone together, and then acted surprised when I mentioned feeling left out, claiming it had been just a spontaneous thing. But the most painful item on that list was the birthday celebration for my mom's 60th. A surprise party that everyone in the family had planned together, assigned roles, coordinated schedules. I'd found out about it the morning of, when Mom mentioned offhandedly that she hoped the surprise tonight goes well. I'd spent the day thinking she was talking about a date with Dad, only to realize that evening, when my phone lit up with photos of the celebration, that I'd been the only family member not included in planning my own mother's milestone birthday. When I'd asked Carmen about it later, she'd shrugged and said, "We thought you'd be too busy with work stuff." But I hadn't been busy. I'd been available, as I always was, as they all knew I always was. The third list was the shortest but most important. What I actually want. Under that heading, I wrote only 2 words. To matter. I stared at those words for a long time, feeling the weight of how simple my needs actually were. I didn't want to be the center of attention. I didn't need constant validation or praise. I just wanted to be considered. To be included. To have my absence noticed, rather than being someone whose presence was barely acknowledged. But as I sat there with my coffee growing cold and my lists spread in front of me, I realized something that changed everything. Wanting to matter to people who consistently prove you don't matter to them isn't hope. It's addiction. And like any addiction, the only way to heal is to cut off the supply. That afternoon, I did something I'd never done before. I called in sick to work, not because I was physically ill, but because I needed a mental health day to think clearly about my next steps. I drove to the public library, found a quiet corner in the research section, and started making phone calls. The first call was to my financial advisor, Rebecca. I'd been working with her for 5 years, and she knew my portfolio better than almost anyone. More importantly, she knew about the various family assistance programs I'd been funding. "Rebecca," I said when she picked up, "I need to talk about restructuring some of my charitable giving." "Of course," she said. "Are you looking to increase contributions somewhere?" "Actually, I'm looking to discontinue several ongoing commitments. Immediately." There was a pause. Rebecca had helped me set up most of these financial arrangements, and she knew how important family was to me. "Maya, is everything okay?" I had rehearsed this conversation in my head during the drive over. "Everything's fine." I've just realized that some of my financial commitments aren't as appreciated as I thought they were. I'd like to redirect those funds toward causes that actually value my contributions. Over the next hour, we went through each account. The monthly transfers to my parents' mortgage account. The automatic contributions to Tyler's education fund. The emergency fund I'd established for Jake that he'd been drawing from regularly without ever acknowledging where the money was coming from. The small monthly payments that covered my mom's membership at the expensive gym she loved but couldn't technically afford. Most of these have 30-day notice periods, Rebecca explained. But I can start the process immediately. Do it, I said. All of it. The second call was to my lawyer, David Chen. I'd worked with him on some real estate investments, and I trusted his judgment. More importantly, I knew he understood the complicated dynamics of family money. David, I need your advice on something delicate, I said. It's about some family financial arrangements that I want to restructure. I'm listening. I explained the situation carefully, focusing on the legal aspects rather than the emotional ones. The various loans that had never been formalized. The property investments I'd made with family members who'd never actually contributed to the down payments. The shared vacation home in the mountains that everyone used, but that I'd been solely responsible for maintaining and insuring. Do I have any legal recourse here? I asked. Or am I just stuck with these obligations because they're family? David was quiet for a moment. Maya, family relationships don't override legal obligations, but they also don't create them where none exist. If you've been voluntarily providing financial support without formal agreements, you're generally free to discontinue that support. However, any actual loans or shared ownership situations would need to be handled more carefully. What would you need to see to give me a complete picture? Documentation, bank records, any written agreements, property deeds, correspondence about these arrangements. Basically, I need to understand what's legally binding versus what's been informal family support. I scheduled an appointment for the following week and spent the rest of the afternoon in the library, pulling up digital copies of bank statements and documenting every financial interaction I'd had with my family over the past 5 years. The numbers were staggering. I'd provided over $75,000 in various forms of support, and most of it had been structured in ways that allowed my family members to pretend it was anything other than charity from Maya. But the most interesting discovery was about the mountain cabin. 3 years ago, when my grandmother passed away, she'd left the property to all 4 of her grandchildren, me, Carmen, Jake, and our cousin David. But over time, the others had gradually signed over their shares to me in exchange for me taking on all the maintenance costs and property taxes. At the time, it had seemed like a fair arrangement. I loved the place and had the financial means to maintain it, while they got to enjoy it without the responsibility. Now, looking at the paperwork, I realized I owned 100% of a property that my entire family treated as their personal vacation home. They scheduled their own getaways there, invited friends and extended family, even hosted events, all without ever asking my permission or acknowledging my ownership. As I drove home that evening, my phone buzzed with a text from Carmen. "Thanks for all your help today. Tyler can't stop talking about the skateboard. You're the best." For the first time in my life, her praise felt hollow rather than healing. She was thanking me for being useful, not for being important. There's a difference, and I was finally ready to acknowledge it. That night, I sat in my living room with a glass of wine and stared at my phone. I had 17 unread messages in the family group chat, the one they'd added me to after the reunion disaster, probably out of guilt. They were sharing photos from Tyler's party, making plans for next weekend, discussing who would bring what to Dad's upcoming retirement celebration. For a moment, I felt the familiar pull to respond, to insert myself into their plans, to volunteer to bring something or offer to help with setup. It was such an ingrained pattern that my fingers actually started typing before I caught myself. Instead, I deleted the half-written message and did something else entirely. I opened my laptop and started drafting an email to David Chen, attaching all the financial documents I'd gathered. In the subject line, I wrote, "Family, financial restructuring, urgent review needed." As I typed, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, the satisfying weight of taking action instead of just absorbing pain. I wasn't planning anything cruel or vindictive. I was simply planning to stop being taken advantage of, but I was also planning something else, something that would make it impossible for them to pretend I didn't matter anymore. Because sometimes, the only way to prove your worth to people who've forgotten it is to show them exactly what they lose when you're gone. The foundation was already cracking. I was just going to help it crumble. David Chen's office smelled like leather and fresh coffee, the kind of place where serious decisions get made and documented properly. I'd been there before for real estate closings, but never for something like this. Never for something that felt so much like dismantling my own life piece by piece. "Maya," David said, settling into his chair across from me with a thick folder of documents. "I've reviewed everything you sent me, and I have to say, this is one of the most complex informal family financial arrangements I've ever seen." I shifted in my seat, suddenly nervous. "Complex how?" "Complex in that you've essentially been operating as an unacknowledged family bank for 5 years. The good news is that almost all of these arrangements are legally voluntary on your part. The challenging news is that unwinding them is going to create significant financial stress for several family members." He opened the folder and pulled out a summary sheet he'd prepared. "Let's start with the easy ones. The monthly transfers to your parents' mortgage account, those can stop immediately. They're listed as gifts in your tax filings, so there's no legal obligation to continue. And the harder ones? The mountain cabin situation is interesting. You own the property outright, which means you have complete control over access. However, your family has been using it regularly for years with your implicit permission, which could create what's called an adverse possession claim if they chose to fight it legally." My stomach dropped. "They could take it from me?" "Unlikely, given the documentation we have. But they could make it expensive and complicated for you to restrict their access. The smarter approach would be to formalize everything now, while you still have complete control." David pulled out another document. "I'd recommend we draft a property use agreement that clearly establishes your ownership and sets specific terms for any family use going forward. We can make those terms as restrictive or accommodating as you choose." "What about the college fund for Tyler?" I asked. That one felt the most complicated emotionally. Tyler hadn't done anything wrong. He was just a kid caught in the middle of adult dysfunction. That's actually simpler than you might think. The account is in your name with Tyler as the beneficiary. You can modify the terms, change the beneficiary, or withdraw the funds entirely. However, David paused. "I'd recommend considering the long-term implications carefully. This decision will affect more than just your relationship with Carmen." I nodded, appreciating his honesty. "What about Jake's emergency fund?" Also straightforward. "It's your money, dispensed at your discretion. You can close it immediately." We spent another hour going through the details, drafting preliminary documents, discussing timelines. By the time I left David's office, I had a clear action plan and a manila envelope full of papers that would fundamentally change my family's financial landscape. But I also had something else: doubt. Walking to my car, I felt the weight of what I was about to do. These weren't just numbers on a spreadsheet. They were real consequences for real people. My parents, who were approaching retirement age and had been relying on my quiet support more than they probably realized. Jake, whose chronic underemployment meant he genuinely needed the emergency fund I'd established. Even Carmen, whose small business had been struggling, and who might need help I wouldn't be providing anymore. For a moment, sitting in the parking lot outside David's office, I almost turned around. Almost went back inside and told him to forget the whole thing. The Maya who had been trained to put everyone else's comfort before her own was screaming at me to reconsider, to be the bigger person, to find another way. But then I remembered Carmen's voice. She always makes everything about her. I remembered the 23 people in that group chat, and how not one of them had thought to include me. I remembered years of birthday parties where I'd been the photographer but never appeared in the photos, family dinners where I'd been the cook but eaten alone after everyone else had been served. I started the car and drove home. That evening, I began implementing what David and I had discussed. The first step was the simplest. I logged into my banking app and canceled the automatic monthly transfer to my parents' mortgage account. $300 that had been leaving my account on the 15th of every month for 3 years. I also canceled the automatic contribution to Tyler's college fund and the standing transfer to Jake's emergency account. With a few taps on my phone screen, I just removed $200 in monthly support from my family's budget. Money they'd grown accustomed to, money they'd begun to expect, money they'd never actually acknowledged receiving. The second step was harder. I drafted an email to my family about the mountain cabin. I wrote it 7 different ways before settling on something that was both clear and professional. Hi everyone. I hope you're all doing well. I'm writing to let you know that I'll be implementing a formal usage agreement for the mountain cabin, effective immediately. As the sole owner of the property, I need to establish clear guidelines for access and maintenance responsibilities. If you're interested in continuing to use the cabin, please let me know by the end of the month so we can discuss terms and scheduling. Going forward, all usage will need to be pre-approved and may include a modest maintenance fee to help cover upkeep costs. I appreciate your understanding as I work to protect this family asset for the long term. Best, Maya. I read it 12 times before hitting send. It was perfectly reasonable, completely professional, and absolutely devastating to their assumption that they could continue treating my property as their own. The response was immediate and explosive. My phone started ringing within 10 minutes of sending the email. Carmen first, then Jake, then my Aunt Linda. I let them all go to voicemail. Then came the texts. Carmen, are you seriously charging us to use Grandma's cabin? Jake, Maya, what the hell is this about? I thought the cabin was for all of us. Mom, honey, please call me. I'm very confused about this email. Aunt Linda, this seems extreme. Can we talk about this like adults? I turned my phone face down and poured myself another glass of wine. Let them be confused. Let them scramble to understand a reality where Maya, quiet, accommodating Maya, had boundaries and expectations. The voicemails were even more revealing. Carmen's message was pure outrage. Maya, I don't know what's gotten into you lately, but this is ridiculous. That cabin has been family property for decades. You can't just suddenly start acting like you own it because you pay some bills. We all contribute in different ways. Call me back immediately so we can sort this out like rational adults. Jake's was more pleading. Hey, Maya, got your email. Look, I know things have been weird lately, but this seems like a huge overreaction. The cabin is like sacred family space, you know? Grandma would be rolling over in her grave if she knew we were fighting about money and access fees. Can we please just talk about this? But it was Mom's message that almost broke my resolve. Sweetheart, I'm not sure what's happening, but you're scaring me. This doesn't sound like you at all. I know we've had some miscommunications lately, but family comes first. It always has. Please call me back tonight. I love you. I played that message 3 times, feeling the familiar tug of guilt and obligation. The old Maya would have called back immediately, apologizing for causing concern, explaining that she didn't really mean it, promising to work things out in a way that made everyone comfortable except herself. But the new Maya, the one who had spent the afternoon documenting years of financial exploitation and social exclusion, saved the message, and went to bed. The next morning brought a new development. I woke up to a missed call from my bank and a voicemail from my account manager. "Ms. Rodriguez, this is Jennifer from First National. I'm calling because we've had several inquiries about some of your recent account changes. Nothing concerning from a security standpoint, but I wanted to confirm that the cancellation of your recurring transfers yesterday was intentional. Please give me a call when you have a chance." Someone in my family had called my bank. Someone had somehow gotten enough information about my accounts to make inquiries about my financial decisions. The violation felt immediate and sharp. I called Jennifer back immediately. "Hi, Jennifer. Yes, those cancellations were completely intentional. But I'm concerned about who was making inquiries about my private accounts. I can't give you specific details about who called," she said carefully, "but I can tell you that we didn't release any information. We just wanted to verify the changes with you directly, since they involve substantial amounts and had been in place for a long time." "What kind of inquiries were they making?" "Questions about whether the accounts had been compromised or if there might be a technical error causing the transfers to stop." I felt a cold anger settle in my chest. Not only had my family been taking my financial support for granted, but when it stopped, their first assumption was that something was wrong with my bank account, rather than that I might have made a conscious choice to stop supporting them. "Jennifer, I'd like to put additional security measures on all my accounts," I said, "and I want to be notified immediately if anyone makes inquiries about my banking activity." "Absolutely. We can set that up right away." After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen staring at my phone, which was buzzing with increasingly frantic messages from various family members. The last one, from Carmen, was particularly telling. "Maya, Mom is crying. She's convinced something terrible has happened to you because you're not responding to anyone. This isn't like you. Whatever's wrong, we can fix it. Just please call someone back." But that was exactly the problem. They thought something was wrong with me because I was finally acting in my own best interest. They couldn't conceive of a Maya who prioritized her own needs, who set boundaries, who expected reciprocity in relationships. They were about to learn that this Maya existed, and she wasn't going anywhere. That afternoon, I got an unexpected visitor. Through my front window, I saw Jake's beat-up Honda pulling into my driveway. He sat in the car for several minutes before getting out, and I could see him on his phone, probably getting coached by Carmen or Mom about what to say. When he finally knocked, I opened the door but didn't invite him in. "Hey," he said, hands shoved deep in his pockets. "Can we talk?" "About what?" "About whatever's going on with you." "Mom's freaking out. Carmen's convinced you've had some kind of breakdown. And this thing with the cabin." He trailed off, looking genuinely confused. "Maya? I don't understand what's happening." I looked at my little brother, 28 years old, still living paycheck to paycheck, still expecting other people to solve his problems for him. Part of me wanted to protect him from what was coming, to explain gently, to soften the blow. Instead, I said, "Jake, when's the last time you asked me how I was doing?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, actually asked about my life, my job, my dating situation, my hobbies, my problems. When's the last time you called me just to check in, not because you needed something?" He opened his mouth to answer, then closed it. I could see him trying to remember, searching through recent conversations for evidence that he'd ever treated me like more than a resource. We talk all the time," he said finally. "You talk, I listen, you need things, I provide them. That's not the same as having a relationship." "Maya, come on, you know I care about you." "Do I?" I asked. "Because when you needed $2,000 for your car last year, you called me immediately. But when I got promoted to regional manager, I had to tell you about it 3 times before you even acknowledged it. When you were stressed about money, I was the first person you thought of. But when I was going through that difficult time with my ex-boyfriend, you didn't even know we'd broken up until Carmen mentioned it at Christmas." Jake's face went red. "That's not, I mean, you never said." "I shouldn't have to say." That's the point. Family members are supposed to care about each other's lives without being prompted. He was quiet for a long moment. Then, so what? You're punishing all of us because we're not good enough at small talk. The question revealed everything I needed to know about how he saw the situation. To Jake, my years of financial and emotional support were just what sisters did. My hurt feelings were just sensitivity. My boundaries were punishment. I'm not punishing anyone, I said calmly. I'm just stopping the behavior that enabled you all to take me for granted. The emergency fund, he started, will be discontinued at the end of the month. Maya, I can't afford to lose that safety net right now. Then I guess you'll have to figure out what everyone else without a secret benefactor does. Save money, ask friends for help, or solve your problems yourself. He stared at me like I'd grown a second head. This isn't you. You don't talk like this. You're right, I said. The old me didn't talk like this. The old me just absorbed disrespect and kept smiling. But she's gone now. I started to close the door, but Jake put his hand against it. Maya, wait, what if we try harder? To include you, I mean. What if we make more effort? I looked at him for a long moment, this brother who had finally noticed me only when his financial security was threatened. Jake, I said gently, you shouldn't have to try to care about your sister, and I shouldn't have to pay for the privilege of being family. This time, when I closed the door, he didn't try to stop me. But the next morning brought news that told me my quiet revolution was about to become much less quiet and much more complicated. The call came at 7:23 a.m. on a Tuesday, jolting me awake from the first peaceful sleep I'd had in weeks. It was Rebecca, my financial advisor, and her voice had an edge I'd never heard before. Maya, we have a problem, she said without preamble. I just got a call from your mother's mortgage company. Apparently, your parents received a notice yesterday that they're 3 months behind on their payments. I sat up in bed, suddenly wide awake. That's impossible. I've been covering those payments for 3 years. That's what I told them. But, according to their records, no payments have been received since you canceled the automatic transfers 2 weeks ago. Maya, your parents have been applying your monthly contributions to other expenses and letting the mortgage payments slide. The words hit me like a physical blow. For 3 years, I'd been sending $300 a month to what I thought was mortgage assistance. Instead, my parents had been using my money as personal spending money while their house slowly moved toward foreclosure. How much do they owe? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to hear the answer. $4, $800 in back payments, plus penalties. They need to bring the account current within 30 days, or the bank will begin foreclosure proceedings. I hung up and stared at the ceiling for a long time. This wasn't just financial irresponsibility. This was fraud. They'd been lying to me for months, maybe longer, about where my money was going. Worse, they'd put themselves in a position where they genuinely needed my help to avoid losing their home, but only because they'd been dishonest about needing my help all along. The old Maya would have driven straight to the bank, written a check for the full amount, and probably set up an even larger monthly transfer to make sure this never happened again. The old Maya would have felt guilty for causing the problem by removing her support, even though the real problem was years of deception. The new Maya got dressed, made coffee, and called David Chen. David, I need to add something to our discussion about family financial arrangements. It turns out my parents have been defrauding me. An hour later, I was back in David's office with Rebecca, and we were reviewing bank statements that painted a devastating picture. Not only had my parents been misusing mortgage assistance, but Jake's emergency fund had been systematically drained for non-emergencies. Concert tickets, restaurant meals, a new gaming console, clothes, even a weekend trip to Las Vegas. The account I'd intended as a safety net for genuine crises had become Jake's personal entertainment budget. Maya, David said carefully, you would have grounds for legal action here. This constitutes fraud, and the amounts involved are substantial. I don't want to sue my family, I said immediately. I understand, but you need to protect yourself. At minimum, we should document everything and send formal notices that any further misuse of your financial assistance will result in legal action. Rebecca added, "There's something else you should know. I pulled reports on the other accounts you've been funding. The pattern is consistent across all of them. Your family has been treating your financial support as guaranteed income and spending accordingly, rather than as assistance for specific needs." The betrayal was complete. Not only had they excluded me socially, but they'd been systematically deceiving me financially while doing it. I'd been subsidizing their lifestyle while they laughed about my hurt feelings behind my back. That afternoon, I did something that felt both terrifying and liberating. I called my parents directly. Mom answered on the second ring. "Maya? Oh, honey, I'm so glad you called. We've been trying to reach you for days." "I know about the mortgage," I said without preamble. Silence. "Mom, I know you've been using my monthly transfers for other things while letting the house payment slide. I know you're facing foreclosure." "Maya, sweetheart, it's not what it looks like." "It's exactly what it looks like," I interrupted. "You've been lying to me for months about where my money was going." "We weren't lying," she said, but her voice was weak. Things got complicated. Your father's business picked up, and we thought we could catch up on our own, and then you kept taking my money anyway." Another silence, longer this time. "Are you going to help us?" she asked finally, and there was something in her voice I'd never heard before. Fear. "I don't know," I said honestly. "Right now, I'm trying to figure out how many other ways you've all been taking advantage of me." "Maya, that's not fair. We're family. Family helps each other." "Family also respects each other," I said. "Family includes each other. Family doesn't lie about money. You want to talk about what's fair? Let's talk about the family reunion I wasn't invited to. Let's talk about the birthday party where you gave a speech about being surrounded by all your blessings while I was at home, wondering why I hadn't heard from anyone." "That was different." "No, Mom, it was all the same. You've been taking what I offered while excluding me from what you valued. And now that I'm not offering anymore, suddenly I'm family again." I hung up before she could respond. Within an hour, my phone was exploding. Group calls that I declined, voice messages that I didn't listen to, and a flurry of text messages from different family members, each trying a different angle. Carmen, guilt. "Mom is having chest pains. Are you happy now?" Jake, anger. "You're destroying this family over money. That's really low, even for you." Aunt Linda, manipulation. "Your grandmother would be heartbroken to see what you're doing to the family she worked so hard to keep together." Cousin David, confusion. "Hey Maya, not sure what's going on, but Carmen says you're trying to sell the cabin. That place has so many memories. Can we talk?" But the message that made me put my phone in a drawer and walk away came from Carmen's husband, Mike, someone I barely knew, who had never initiated a conversation with me in the 8 years he'd been married to my sister. "Maya, I don't know you very well, but Carmen is falling apart. Whatever happened between you all, she's taking it really hard. She keeps saying she doesn't understand how you could be so cruel. Maybe you could just talk to her?" The word cruel stopped me cold. After years of being ignored, excluded, and financially exploited, setting boundaries was, quote, cruel. After being treated like a wallet with feelings, expecting basic respect was destroying the family. That evening, I sat in my living room with a yellow legal pad and wrote a letter I never intended to send. It was just for me, to organize my thoughts, to process the enormity of what I was learning about my family and myself. Dear everyone, you want to know why I'm doing this? Because for 5 years, I've been your family ATM. You've taken $75,000 from me while simultaneously erasing me from your lives. You've used my money to fund vacations I wasn't invited on, celebrations I wasn't included in, and gatherings I wasn't told about. You call me cruel for setting boundaries, but what do you call years of lies about mortgage payments? What do you call treating someone like a bank account with emotions? What do you call making someone beg for basic inclusion in their own family? What do you call a year sabai? I'm not doing this to hurt you. I'm doing this because you've already hurt me in every way that matters, and I'm finally strong enough to stop pretending it doesn't matter. You had a choice. You could have treated me like family while I was supporting you financially. Instead, you chose to take my money and exclude my person. Now you get to live with that choice. Maya. I folded the letter and put it in my desk drawer. Writing it had been cathartic, but I didn't need to send it. My actions were speaking loud enough. But as I got ready for bed that night, I had a feeling that the hardest part was still coming. Because money problems have a way of forcing people to show their true character, and I was about to find out exactly who my family really was when they couldn't rely on quiet, giving Maya to solve their problems for them. The next morning would bring the phone call that made everything crystal clear, and by the end of the week, I would know exactly how far I was willing to go to protect the peace I was finally building for myself. The phone call that changed everything came on Thursday morning while I was getting ready for work. It was Carmen, but her voice was different, smaller, more careful than I'd heard it in years. Maya, she said, we need to talk, all of us, together. About what? About this situation. About finding a way forward that works for everyone. I paused in applying my mascara. Carmen, there is no situation. I'm just not funding everyone's lifestyle anymore. That's called having boundaries. It's called having a breakdown. She snapped, then caught herself. Look, I'm sorry. I didn't mean that. But Maya, you have to understand how this looks from our perspective. You've cut off all financial support. You're threatening to restrict the cabin. You won't return anyone's calls. We're worried about you. Are you worried about me or worried about your budgets? That's not fair, isn't it? Because the only time any of you have reached out to me in the past 2 weeks is to ask about money or to tell me how my decisions are affecting you. No one has asked how I'm doing or why I might have made these choices. Carmen was quiet for a moment. Okay, she said finally. You're right, we should have asked. So I'm asking now, why are you doing this? The question hung between us, and for a moment I almost answered honestly. Almost explained about the years of feeling invisible, the gradual erosion of my place in the family, the crushing realization that I'd been valued for my wallet more than my presence. Instead, I said, because I finally realized that respect isn't something you should have to buy. What does that mean? It means that if you want to understand why I'm making these changes, you'll need to start by acknowledging how you've been treating me. And based on every conversation we've had this week, you're not ready to do that. Maya, please, just come to dinner on Sunday. At Mom and Dad's. We'll all be there. We can work this out like adults. I almost laughed. Will I be there, Carmen? Or will I find out about it through someone's Instagram story? Of course you'll be there. We're specifically inviting you because you need something from me. Because you're family. Then why wasn't I family 3 weeks ago when you were all at the lake reunion without me? She didn't have an answer for that. I'll think about it, I said, and hung up. But I'd already made my decision. I was going to that dinner, but not for the reasons they expected. That afternoon, I met with David Chen one more time to finalize the documents we'd been preparing. The property use agreement for the mountain cabin was ironclad. It established my sole ownership clearly and required advance written permission for any use of the property. More importantly, it included a clause that would charge a $200 per night usage fee for any unauthorized access. Are you sure about this approach? David asked. Once we formalize this agreement, it's going to be very difficult to go back to informal arrangements. I'm sure, I said. I've been informal with them for years, and look where it got me. And the other documents? The other documents were more complex. Formal loan agreements for the money I'd provided to various family members, complete with payment schedules and interest rates. Legal notices that my financial support for their various ventures was ending. And most importantly, a comprehensive accounting of every dollar I'd contributed to family expenses over the past 5 years, organized by recipient and purpose. This is thorough, David said, flipping through the pages, and legally sound. But Maya, once you present this to your family, there's no taking it back. This is going to fundamentally change your relationships with all of them. Good, I said, because what we had wasn't working. Sunday came faster than I expected. I spent the morning preparing for what I knew would be the most difficult conversation of my life. I printed out copies of all the documents David and I had prepared. I practiced staying calm in the mirror. I chose my outfit carefully, professional but not intimidating, confident but not aggressive. At 4 p.m., I pulled into my parents' driveway. Every other family member was already there. Carmen's SUV, Jake's Honda, Aunt Linda's sedan, even Cousin David's truck. They'd clearly coordinated to ensure maximum attendance for whatever intervention they had planned. I sat in my car for a few minutes, looking at the house where I'd grown up, where I'd spent countless holidays and birthdays, feeling like a guest in my own family. Through the kitchen window, I could see figures moving around, probably making final preparations for the ambush. When I knocked on the front door, Jake answered. "Hey," he said, trying to sound casual. "Everyone's in the living room." I followed him down the hallway, my folder of documents clutched against my chest like armor. The living room had been arranged for a meeting. Chairs pulled into a circle, coffee and cookies on the side table, everyone's faces wearing the same expression of concerned determination. "Maya," Mom said, standing up immediately. "I'm so glad you came. We've all been so worried." I remained standing near the doorway. "Worried about what?" "About you," Carmen said. "About these drastic changes you're making. About the fact that you've completely shut us out." "I haven't shut you out," I said calmly. "I've just stopped funding you." Uncomfortable silence. Dad cleared his throat. "Maya, honey, please sit down. Let's talk about this like a family." "Are we a family, Dad?" I asked. "Because families usually invite each other to reunions." "That was a mistake," Aunt Linda said quickly. "A communication error. These things happen in large families." "No," I said, opening my folder. "These things happen when you create group chats specifically to exclude someone, when you coordinate events behind someone's back, when you treat someone like they don't matter." I pulled out the first document and held it up. "This is a complete accounting of every dollar I've contributed to this family over the past 5 years. $75,432. The room went completely silent. "Maya," Mom started, but I held up my hand. "I'm not finished." "This next document is a record of every social event, gathering, or family celebration I was excluded from during that same period. 14 occasions, including birthday parties, holiday celebrations, and the annual reunion." I could see them shifting uncomfortably, exchanging glances. "And this," I said, pulling out the third document, "is a formal loan agreement for the money I discovered you've been misusing, Mom and Dad. The money I thought was going to mortgage payments that you've actually been spending on other things while your house moved toward foreclosure." Dad's face went pale. "Maya, we can explain." "Can you? Because I'd love to hear how you explain taking money under false pretenses for 3 years. I'd love to hear how you justify letting me believe I was helping save your home while you were actually putting it at risk." Carmen stood up abruptly. "Okay, this is ridiculous. So we made some mistakes. So what? That doesn't give you the right to hold money over our heads like some kind of dictator." You're right, I said, surprising them all. It doesn't. Which is why I'm not holding money over anyone's heads. I'm simply removing myself from your financial equations entirely. I set the folder on the coffee table and remained standing. These documents make everything official. The loans you've received are now formal agreements with payment schedules. The cabin access is now governed by a legal contract. And all ongoing financial support ends immediately. Maya, Mom said, and I could hear tears in her voice. You can't mean this. I absolutely mean it. But here's what's interesting. I looked around the room at all of them. In all your worry about losing my financial support, not one of you has apologized for excluding me. Not one of you has acknowledged that you've been treating me poorly. Your concern isn't about our relationship. It's about your budgets. Jake leaned forward. That's not true. We care about you. When's the last time you called me just to see how I was doing? That's not. When's the last time any of you asked about my life, my work, my interests, my problems? When's the last time I was invited somewhere just because you wanted my company, not because you needed my help? The silence was deafening. You care about what I can do for you, I continued. That's not the same thing as caring about me. Carmen's composure finally cracked. Fine, you want an apology? I'm sorry we're not perfect. I'm sorry we sometimes forget to include you in things. I'm sorry we don't call you every day to ask about your feelings. But this nuclear option is insane. You're destroying everything over hurt feelings. Over hurt feelings, I repeated slowly. Carmen, do you hear yourself? You're minimizing years of exclusion and financial deception as hurt feelings. What do you want from us? She demanded. What would it take for you to stop this? It was the question I'd been waiting for, and I'd prepared my answer carefully. I want you to acknowledge what you've done. I want genuine apologies, not defensive explanations. I want inclusion going forward, not because you need something from me, but because I'm your daughter and sister. And I want honesty about money. If you need help, ask for it directly instead of lying about where my contributions are going. And if we do all that, Dad asked, if we make these changes, then we can talk about rebuilding our relationship. But the financial arrangements stay as they are now. No more informal loans, no more automatic transfers, no more treating me like a silent partner in your lives. Aunt Linda stood up. This is blackmail. No, I said, picking up my folder. Blackmail would be threatening to expose your financial situation to the rest of the family, unless you change your behavior. What I'm doing is called setting boundaries. I headed toward the door, then paused. Oh, and one more thing. I know someone called my bank trying to get information about my accounts. That stops now. Any further attempts to investigate or interfere with my financial decisions will result in formal legal action. The room erupted as I left. Voices raised, accusations flying, people talking over each other in the desperate way families do when their carefully constructed dynamics suddenly collapse. But I kept walking. Out the front door, down the driveway, into my car. As I drove away, I could see them through the living room window, still arguing, still trying to figure out how to get back what they'd lost without acknowledging why they'd lost it. For the first time in weeks, I felt completely calm, not happy exactly, but clear. I'd put all my cards on the table. I'd been completely honest about what I needed and what I was willing to accept. Now it was up to them to decide whether they valued having me in their lives enough to actually treat me like family. But I wasn't going to hold my breath waiting for their answer. Because I'd finally learned something crucial. You can't make people love you, but you can stop making it easy for them to take you for granted. The real test would come in the days ahead, when they realized I meant every word I'd said, and when they discovered that quiet, accommodating Maya was gone for good. The silence lasted exactly 4 days. For 4 blissful days after the family meeting, my phone was quiet. No guilt-laden voicemails, no manipulative text messages, no unexpected visitors showing up at my door with tears and accusations. I almost started to believe that maybe, just maybe, they were actually considering what I'd said. Maybe they were reflecting on their behavior, having honest conversations about how they'd treated me, preparing genuine apologies. I should have known better. The silence broke on Thursday evening with a phone call from my cousin David, the one family member who'd always been neutral in family drama, who lived 3 states away and only visited during major holidays. His voice was tense in a way I'd never heard before. "Maya, what the hell is going on down there?" he said without preamble. "I just got off a 2-hour phone call with your mom, and she's telling me you've lost your mind." My stomach sank. "What did she tell you?" "She said you've cut off all support to the family, that you're trying to charge people to use the cabin, that you've been sending threatening legal documents to everyone. She said you told them you don't consider them family anymore." I closed my eyes, feeling the familiar weight of having my words twisted beyond recognition. "David, that's not what happened." "Then tell me what did happen. Because from where I'm sitting, it sounds like you've decided to punish everyone for some perceived slight." "Perceived slight," I repeated. "David, they excluded me from the family reunion. They've been lying to me about money for years. They've been using my financial support while simultaneously erasing me from family events. Look, I know they can be thoughtless sometimes." "Thoughtless?" My voice rose despite my efforts to stay calm. "David, they created a group chat to plan the reunion specifically without including me. When I found out about it by accident, Carmen told me to take the hint. They've been using money I thought was going to mortgage payments to fund personal expenses while their house went into foreclosure. This isn't thoughtlessness. This is systematic exclusion and financial fraud." He was quiet for a long moment. "Maya, I hear what you're saying, but nothing. You want to know what really happened? They got caught. They got caught treating me like garbage while taking my money. And instead of apologizing, they're trying to make me look like the unreasonable one." "Even if that's true," David said carefully, "don't you think there might be a better way to handle this? Something less nuclear?" "I tried the non-nuclear way for 5 years," I said. "I tried being understanding. I tried giving them the benefit of the doubt. I tried talking to them directly about feeling excluded. The result was that things got worse, not better." "So your solution is to blow up the entire family?" "My solution is to stop pretending that what we had was actually a family." After I hung up, I sat in my living room feeling a familiar heaviness settle over me. This was how it always went. Someone in the family would do something hurtful. I would try to address it, and somehow I would end up being the problem, the unreasonable one. The dramatic one, the one who needed to be more understanding, more forgiving, more willing to just let things go. But this time felt different, because this time I had documentation. This time I had legal backing. This time I had David Chen's voice in my head, reminding me that wanting respect in a relationship isn't unreasonable. It's basic human dignity. Friday brought the next phase of their campaign. I woke up to find my elderly neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, standing on my front porch with a concerned expression and a casserole dish. "Maya, dear," she said when I opened the door. "Your mother called me yesterday. She's very worried about you." I invited Mrs. Patterson in, already knowing where this conversation was heading. My mom had weaponized the neighborhood network, calling in the sweet elderly woman who'd known me since I was 12 to do what the family couldn't, make me feel guilty for protecting myself. "She said you've been under a lot of stress lately," Mrs. Patterson continued, settling into my kitchen chair. "Work pressure? Maybe some relationship troubles? She thought you might need someone to talk to." "What else did she tell you?" Mrs. Patterson looked uncomfortable. "Well, she mentioned that there's been some family tension. Something about money and misunderstandings. She's very upset, Maya. She said she doesn't recognize you anymore." I made tea while Mrs. Patterson talked. listening to the carefully crafted version of events my mother had fed her. In Mom's telling, I had suddenly become erratic and vindictive, cutting off support to struggling family members during difficult times. I was holding grudges over minor social oversights. I was threatening legal action over misunderstandings. "Maya," Mrs. Patterson said gently, "I've known you since you were a child. You've always been such a giving person, so thoughtful and kind. This doesn't sound like you." "You're right," I said, sitting down across from her. "It doesn't sound like the me you've known." "But Mrs. Patterson, what if the me you've known was someone who'd been trained to accept mistreatment as normal?" She blinked, clearly not expecting that response. What if the giving, thoughtful Maya was actually just a woman who'd been conditioned to believe that her value came from how much she could provide for other people? "I don't understand." I pulled out my phone and showed her some of the documents I'd prepared. For 5 years, I've been financially supporting my family in various ways. I've contributed over $75,000 to their expenses, their emergencies, their wants and needs. During that same time period, I was excluded from 14 family events, including major holidays and my own mother's birthday celebration. Mrs. Patterson's face changed as she processed what I was telling her. The woman you've known, the giving Maya, she kept providing that support while being treated like she didn't matter. She kept showing up to help with dishes and decorations for parties she wasn't invited to. She kept being understanding about oversights and miscommunications that happened with suspicious regularity. Oh, Maya. That Maya is gone, Mrs. Patterson. Not because I've become cruel or vindictive, but because I finally realized that giving everything and expecting nothing in return isn't kindness. It's self-destruction. Mrs. Patterson was quiet for a long time. Finally, she said, "What did your mother expect me to tell you?" "Probably that I'm worrying everyone, that family is important, that I should consider forgiveness, that I'm being too harsh and should find a way to work things out." "And what would you like me to tell her?" The question caught me off guard. I'd expected Mrs. Patterson to deliver whatever message my mother had coached her to share. Instead, she was asking what I needed. "Tell her that I'm doing better than I have in years," I said. "Tell her that I'm not angry or vindictive. I'm just done accepting less than I deserve." After Mrs. Patterson left, I spent the evening preparing for what I knew was coming next. Because my family had shown me their playbook over the years. When emotional manipulation didn't work, when guilt tactics failed, when even third-party interventions fell flat, they escalated to consequences. The consequences arrived Saturday morning in the form of a Facebook post from Carmen. I saw it while scrolling through my feed with my morning coffee, and it stopped me cold. It was a long, emotional post about family challenges and difficult times. It talked about how mental health struggles can sometimes cause people to lash out at those who love them most. It asked for prayers for our family as we navigated a situation involving financial disputes and broken relationships. The post didn't mention my name specifically, but it didn't need to. Anyone who knew our family would understand exactly who it was about. And the comments were exactly what Carmen had intended. Sending love during this difficult time. Family is everything. Hope you can work it out. Some people don't understand how good they have it until it's gone. Money and family should never mix. Praying for healing, Carmen had effectively weaponized our entire social circle, painting herself as the victim of my unreasonable behavior while carefully omitting any context about why I might be upset. She'd made me the villain in a story where I was actually the victim, and she'd done it publicly, permanently, and strategically. I screenshotted the post and texted it to David Chen with a message. "Is this defamation?" His response came back within an hour. "Potentially. But more importantly, it's evidence of bad faith on their part. Save everything." That afternoon, I made a decision that surprised even me. Instead of responding to Carmen's post or trying to defend myself publicly, I wrote my own Facebook post, not about the family drama, but about something entirely different. Grateful to announce that I've been promoted to Senior Regional Manager at Hartwell Financial. It's been an incredible year of professional growth, and I'm excited about the new challenges ahead. Also planning my first solo trip to Ireland this fall. Always wanted to see the Ring of Kerry. Life is good when you focus on the people and experiences that truly matter. Hashtag new chapter, hashtag Ireland 2024, hashtag grateful for growth. Within an hour, the post had dozens of likes and comments from friends, colleagues, and acquaintances, congratulating me on the promotion and asking about my travel plans. People I hadn't heard from in months were reaching out to reconnect, to celebrate my success, to express genuine excitement about my achievements. What was notably absent from the comment section was my family. Not one of them liked the post. Not one of them congratulated me. Not one of them even acknowledged that I'd shared significant news about my life. But what they did do was call. My phone rang constantly for the rest of the weekend. Carmen was furious that I'd made her look bad by posting about success and happiness, right after her emotional plea for prayers. Jake wanted to know why I hadn't told anyone about the promotion. Mom was confused about why I was planning an international trip when the family was in crisis. I didn't answer any of the calls. Instead, I spent Sunday afternoon doing something I hadn't done in years. I drove to the mountain cabin by myself. The drive took 2 hours, winding through forests that were just beginning to show their fall colors. I'd always loved this route, but I'd never driven it alone. Usually, I was following a convoy of family cars, arriving last, leaving early, spending the weekend managing logistics while everyone else relaxed. This time, I had the key. I had the deed. I had the legal right to be there. And for the first time in my adult life, I was going to spend time in that beautiful space without worrying about anyone else's needs or schedules or expectations. The cabin was exactly as I'd left it after the last family gathering, clean, stocked, ready for visitors who never asked permission to visit. I unlocked the door and stepped inside, breathing in the familiar smell of cedar and old wood smoke. But this time, something was different. This time, instead of immediately starting to clean or organize or prepare for other people's comfort, I just stood in the main room and looked around. Really looked. The walls were covered with family photos spanning decades. Camping trips, holiday celebrations, summer gatherings. In almost every photo, I was either absent entirely or positioned at the edge of the frame, like an afterthought that had wandered into the shot. There was one photo in particular that stopped me. It was from last summer's 4th of July celebration at the cabin, the one I'd hosted, planned, and paid for entirely on my own. In the photo, everyone was gathered around the big dining table, laughing and raising their glasses in a toast. I wasn't in the picture at all, because I'd been in the kitchen, as always, preparing the next course while the celebration happened without me. I took that photo down from the wall and looked at it for a long time. Then I walked outside and threw it in the fire pit. As I watched my family's smiling faces curl and blacken in the flames, I felt something I'd never felt before at this place. Peace. Not the frantic peace of someone trying to make everyone else happy, but the deep, settled peace of someone who finally belonged somewhere, even if that somewhere was a place she had to claim entirely for herself. That night, I slept in the master bedroom for the first time ever. Usually, that room was reserved for my parents or Carmen's family, while I took the small guest room with the narrow single bed. But this time, I was the only guest, and I was also the host. I woke up Monday morning to the sound of silence and possibility. No one needed me to be anywhere, do anything, or provide anything. For the first time in years, my day belonged entirely to me. But as I made coffee and watched the sunrise over the lake, I knew the real confrontation was still coming. Because people who are used to taking don't give up easily, and my family was about to discover just how much they'd been taking for granted. The emergency came on a Wednesday morning, delivered through a phone call that I almost didn't answer. It was Carmen, but her voice was different, shaky, desperate, stripped of the righteous anger that had characterized all our recent interactions. "Maya," she said, and I could hear that she'd been crying. "I need your help. It's about Tyler." My blood went cold. "What happened? Is he hurt?" "No, Maya, he's been asking questions. About why you don't come around anymore. About why everyone's been upset. About money." Her voice cracked. "He heard Mike and me arguing about the college fund last night. He knows something's wrong and he's blaming himself." I felt my carefully constructed walls waver. Tyler was innocent in all of this. He was just a kid who loved his aunt and couldn't understand why the adults in his life were suddenly acting strange. "What do you want me to do about it?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "I want you to come over and explain to him that none of this is his fault, that you still love him, that whatever's happening between us adults doesn't have anything to do with him." The request was reasonable, and my first instinct was to say yes immediately. But something held me back. A suspicion that this wasn't really about Tyler at all. "Carmen, is Tyler actually asking these questions? Or are you using his confusion as a way to get me to come over so you can try to manipulate me into changing my mind?" "How can you even ask that?" she said, sounding genuinely hurt. "This is about my son's emotional well-being. Then bring him to my house, or we can meet at a park, somewhere neutral. Maya, he wants to see you at home. This place is familiar to him. Please, just this once." Against my better judgment, I agreed. But I set conditions. 1 hour, Tyler only, no other family members present, and no discussion about financial matters or family drama. When I arrived at Carmen's house that afternoon, I could immediately tell something was wrong. There were too many cars in the driveway. Mom's sedan, Jake's Honda, even Aunt Linda's car. This wasn't about Tyler's questions. This was an ambush. I almost turned around and left. But then I saw Tyler's face in the living room window, and he looked genuinely sad in a way that had nothing to do with adult scheming. Whatever else was happening, that little boy was hurting, and it wasn't his fault. I knocked on the door, and Carmen answered immediately, like she'd been waiting right there. "Thank you for coming," she said, but she couldn't meet my eyes. "Where's Tyler?" "He's in his room. But Maya, before you go up there, we need to talk, all of us." "No," I said firmly. "That's not what we agreed to. Please, just 5 minutes. There's something we need to tell you." Against every instinct screaming at me to leave, I followed her into the living room. The same circle of chairs from the previous week had been set up again, but this time everyone looked different. Smaller somehow. Defeated. "Maya," Mom said as soon as I sat down, "we've been talking all week about what you said, about how we've been treating you." And you're right," Dad said quietly, "about most of it anyway. We haven't been including you the way we should. We haven't been appreciating what you've done for us." I waited, suspicious of where this was heading. "We want to make it right," Carmen said. "We want to find a way to move forward that works for everyone." "What are you proposing?" Jake leaned forward. "We'll be better about including you. We'll add you to all the group chats. We'll make sure you're invited to everything going forward." "And in exchange?" I asked, because there was always an exchange. "We need you to reconsider some of the financial changes," Mom said. "The mortgage situation is getting critical. We could lose the house." There it was, the real agenda. They were willing to promise inclusion in exchange for me resuming my role as family ATM. "You're asking me to pay for inclusion in my own family," I said slowly. That's not how we're thinking about it, Carmen said quickly. We're asking you to help us through a difficult time while we work on being better family members to you. So if I don't resume financial support, the improved treatment goes away? That's not what we're saying, Aunt Linda interjected. Then let's test it, I said, standing up. Let's see how much better you treat me when I'm not paying for the privilege. Maya, please, Dad said. We're trying to compromise here. No, you're trying to negotiate. There's a difference. You want me to buy my way back into a family that should have never required a purchase price in the first place. That's when Tyler appeared at the top of the stairs. Aunt Maya? He called down. Are you here to see me? My heart broke a little. In all their scheming and strategizing, they'd forgotten that Tyler was actually waiting for me. That he really did have questions. That he really was confused and hurting. Hey, buddy, I said, ignoring the adults and focusing entirely on him. Can I come up to your room? I brought you something. Tyler's face lit up, and he nodded enthusiastically. As I headed toward the stairs, Carmen grabbed my arm. Maya, we're not done talking. I looked down at her hand on my arm, then back at her face. Yes, we are. Tyler's room was exactly what you'd expect from an 8-year-old boy. Lego creations on every surface, posters of superheroes and video game characters, clothes strewn across the floor in creative patterns. But when he closed the door behind us, his expression turned serious. Aunt Maya, why is everyone mad at you? I sat on his bed and chose my words carefully. Sometimes adults disagree about important things, and it can make family relationships complicated. Mom said you don't want to be part of our family anymore. The manipulation was breathtaking. They'd told an 8-year-old that his aunt was abandoning the family, rather than explaining that they'd been excluding her. Tyler, that's not true. I love you very much, and that's never going to change. But I've had to make some decisions about how I spend my time and energy. Because we made you sad? The directness of children can be devastating. Yes, buddy. Some people in our family made me feel very sad for a very long time. I didn't make you sad, did I? Never, I said firmly. You have never, ever made me sad. You always make me happy. I pulled a wrapped package from my bag. I brought you something. Inside was a journal with a leather cover and his initials embossed on the front. This is for writing down your thoughts and feelings when things get confusing. Sometimes writing helps us understand our emotions better. Tyler examined the journal seriously. Will you write in it with me sometimes? If your mom says it's okay for me to visit you, then yes. He hugged me then, the fierce, desperate hug of a child who senses that something fundamental is changing but doesn't understand what or why. Aunt Maya, are you going to disappear like Uncle Marcus did? Uncle Marcus, Carmen's first husband, Tyler's biological father, who'd had a falling out with the family when Tyler was 3 and had gradually been erased from family narratives until he became just Tyler's dad, rather than someone with a name or continued relationship with any of us. I'm not disappearing, I said carefully, but I might not be around as much as I used to be. Because of the grown-up fighting? Because sometimes people need space to figure out how to treat each other better. When I came back downstairs, the family was clustered in the kitchen, whispering urgently. They stopped talking when I appeared. How did it go? Carmen asked. He's confused and scared, I said. Because you told him I don't want to be part of the family anymore, instead of explaining that you've been excluding me from the family. We were trying to protect him from adult drama. You were trying to make me look like the abandoner instead of admitting you've been the excluders. I headed toward the door, but Mom called after me. Maya, wait. About the mortgage situation. We really could lose the house. I turned back. Mom, you've had 3 years to tell me you were falling behind on payments. 3 years to ask for help honestly. Instead, You took my money under false pretenses while your house moved toward foreclosure. That's not my emergency. It's the consequence of your choices. So you're just going to let us lose our home? The question was designed to make me feel guilty, and for a moment, it worked. These were my parents. This was the house I'd grown up in, the place where my childhood memories lived. But then I remembered something David Chen had told me. The people who taught you that love requires you to sacrifice your well-being for theirs aren't actually demonstrating love, they're demonstrating control. I'm not letting you lose anything, I said. Your financial problems exist because of your financial choices. They're not my responsibility to solve, especially when solving them requires me to continue funding people who don't respect me. But we said we'd do better. Jake protested. You said you'd include me if I kept paying for things. That's not doing better. That's negotiating the price of my inclusion. I left without another word, but as I drove away, I saw Tyler watching from his bedroom window, his new journal clutched against his chest. That image would haunt me for days. That evening, I received an email that changed everything. It was from a law firm I didn't recognize, and the subject line made my stomach drop. Formal notice regarding property dispute. The letter informed me that Tara Rodriguez, apparently my cousin David's legal name was actually Tara, something I'd never known, was challenging my ownership of the mountain cabin, claiming that the transfers of ownership from other family members had been made under duress and that the property rightfully belonged to all of my grandmother's grandchildren equally. She was suing me for the family cabin, using a lawyer who specialized in property disputes and inheritance challenges. I called David Chen immediately. They're actually taking legal action? He asked after I read him the letter. Apparently. Is this serious? Potentially very serious. Property disputes can be expensive and time-consuming, even when you have clear legal standing. Maya, this suggests they're not planning to back down or work things out amicably. So what do? We fight back. But more importantly, we accelerate our timeline for everything else. If they're willing to sue you over the cabin, they're not going to hesitate to cause problems with your other assets or financial arrangements. That night, I sat in my living room with a glass of wine and the realization that my quiet revolution had become a full-scale war. My family wasn't just upset about losing my financial support. They were actively trying to take things from me through legal action. The gloves were officially off. And if they wanted to play hardball, I was about to show them that quiet, accommodating Maya had been hiding a much more formidable opponent than they'd ever imagined. Because I'd spent 5 years learning their weaknesses, while they'd spent 5 years underestimating my strength. Now they were about to discover exactly what they'd awakened. The legal battle over the mountain cabin lasted 6 weeks and cost me $12,000 in attorney fees. But it also gave me something invaluable: absolute clarity about who my family really was. David Chen and I built an airtight case. We had documentation of every payment I'd made toward the property over the years, every tax bill I'd covered, every maintenance expense I'd shouldered alone. We had signed documents from each family member transferring their ownership shares to me, in exchange for my assumption of all financial responsibilities. Most damning of all, we had evidence that Tara had been planning elaborate family vacations at the cabin while simultaneously claiming she couldn't afford to contribute to its upkeep. The case never made it to trial. Tara's lawyer took one look at our documentation and advised her to settle. But the process revealed something that shook me more than any of the financial deception. My entire family had encouraged and supported Tara's lawsuit against me. Text messages submitted as evidence showed Carmen coaching Tara on what to claim. Email chains revealed Jake researching ways to challenge my ownership. Even my parents had provided statements supporting Tara's position, despite knowing that I'd been solely responsible for maintaining the property for years. They hadn't just excluded me from their lives. They'd actively worked together to try to take from me the one place where I'd found peace. Maya, David said after we received notice that Tara was dropping the lawsuit. I've been practicing family law for 15 years. And I've never seen anything quite like this. Usually, families fight about money because they're desperate. Your family fought about money because they felt entitled to yours. The distinction was important, and it crystallized something I'd been struggling to understand. This wasn't about financial need. It was about power and control. They'd been comfortable with a dynamic where I provided and they received, where I accommodated and they demanded, where I apologized and they blamed. My boundaries hadn't just disrupted their finances, they'd disrupted their entire understanding of how our family worked. But winning the legal battle was just the beginning. The real victory came in the months that followed, as I watched my family scramble to adjust to a reality where Maya wasn't available to solve their problems. My parents, faced with the genuine possibility of foreclosure, finally sought financial counseling and discovered programs for seniors facing mortgage difficulties. They qualified for a modification that reduced their monthly payments and eliminated the need for my assistance. When Dad called to tell me about it, he sounded surprised by his own capability. "Maya," he said, "I never realized there were so many resources available. We could have handled this ourselves years ago if we'd just looked into it." "Yes," I said simply. "You could have." Jake, deprived of his emergency fund safety net, finally got serious about his finances. He took a second job, moved to a smaller apartment, and started building actual savings for the first time in his adult life. When he called to tell me about getting a promotion at his main job, I could hear genuine pride in his voice, the pride of someone who'd accomplished something entirely on his own. "I never thought I could handle this stuff by myself," he admitted, "but it turns out I'm more capable than I thought." "I always knew you were," I said, and meant it. But the most interesting development came from Carmen. Deprived of the cabin for her usual elaborate social media gatherings, she'd started hosting smaller events at her own house. Without the pressure of maintaining a perfect backdrop for her online image, her parties became more intimate, more genuine. When she posted photos now, they showed actual moments of connection rather than staged performances. "Maya," she said during one of our cautious phone conversations in late fall, "I've been thinking about what you said, about earning inclusion rather than buying it. And I think I understand now why you were so hurt. I think we all got used to you just being there, handling things, taking care of everyone. We stopped seeing you as a person with your own needs." It was the closest to an apology I'd received from any of them, and it meant more than she probably realized. "Carmen, can I ask you something honestly?" "Sure." "If I had never provided any financial support to this family, if I had just been Maya the person instead of Maya the helper, would you have included me more or less in family activities?" She was quiet for a long time. "I don't know," she said finally. "I'd like to think more, but honestly, I don't know." The honesty was brutal but refreshing. At least we were finally dealing with reality, instead of pretending that their exclusion had been accidental. As winter settled in, I found myself in a strange new reality. My bank account was healthier than it had been in years, growing rather than constantly draining to cover other people's expenses. My stress levels had dropped dramatically, without the constant weight of managing everyone else's crises. I'd gotten serious about hobbies I'd neglected for years: photography, rock climbing, learning Spanish. But the most significant change was in my social life. Without the exhausting demands of family drama, I had energy for new friendships. I joined a hiking group and discovered a community of people who appreciated my reliability without exploiting it. I started dating again, meeting people who saw my kindness as a gift rather than an expectation. In December, I did something that would have been unthinkable a year earlier. I hosted my own Christmas party, not for family, but for the friends and colleagues who had become my chosen family. People who celebrated my successes, supported me during difficulties, and included me in their lives without requiring payment for the privilege. The party was small but perfect. Good food, genuine laughter, conversations about books and travel and dreams for the future. As I looked around my living room at these people who genuinely enjoyed my company, I realized something profound. I'd been so focused on trying to matter to people who didn't value me that I'd nearly missed the people who did. That same week, I received an unexpected piece of mail. A handwritten letter from Tyler, written in his careful 8-year-old cursive. Dear Aunt Maya, A.S. Mom helped me find your address. I hope that's okay. I wanted to tell you that I've been writing in the journal you gave me. I wrote about missing you and about being confused about why grown-ups fight about money. Mom explained that sometimes families have disagreements and need space to figure things out. She said it doesn't mean anyone stopped loving anyone else, just that they need time to learn how to be better. I hope you're having a good time learning how to be better. I'm learning too. I'm learning that it's okay to ask questions when I don't understand something, and that it's not my job to fix grown-up problems. I miss you, but I understand that you need space right now. When you're ready to see me again, I'll be here. I'll probably be taller by then. Love, Tyler. P.S. I used the skateboard. You got me to learn a new trick. I can't wait to show you when you're ready. I cried when I read that letter. Not from sadness, but from the overwhelming relief of being seen and understood by the one family member who had never expected anything from me except love. I wrote back immediately. Dear Tyler, thank you for your beautiful letter. It sounds like you're becoming very wise for 8 years old. You're right that sometimes adults need space to learn how to treat each other better. And you're absolutely right that it's not your job to fix grown-up problems. I miss you too, buddy. Very much. And I hope that someday soon, the grown-ups will figure out how to be the kind of family that you deserve. Keep writing in your journal. Keep learning new skateboard tricks. Keep being the amazing kid you are. I love you always, Aunt Maya. P.S. I can't wait to see your new trick when the time is right. As I sealed the envelope, I realized something that surprised me. I wasn't angry anymore. The sharp, burning rage that had driven my initial actions had settled into something calmer and more sustainable. I wasn't motivated by revenge or hurt anymore. I was motivated by self-preservation and dignity. The mountain cabin became my sanctuary that winter. I spent weekends there alone, reading by the fireplace, hiking the familiar trails, cooking elaborate meals just for myself. Sometimes I miss the chaotic energy of family gatherings, but I never miss the feeling of being peripheral in my own life. In February, I received a phone call that showed me how much had really changed. It was from a wedding planner in the city, calling about Cousin David's upcoming wedding. Ms. Rodriguez, I'm calling to confirm your meal preference for the reception. The bride mentioned that there had been some family complications, but she wanted to make sure you received your invitation. I hadn't received any invitation. Could you give me the wedding date? I asked. April 15th. It's going to be a beautiful spring celebration. Another family event I hadn't been told about. But this time, instead of hurt or surprise, I felt something else. Relief. The relief of knowing that I was no longer waiting for inclusion that would never come. Thank you for calling, I told the wedding planner, but I won't be attending. Should I ask the bride to follow up with you directly? No, I said. That won't be necessary. As spring arrived, I started making plans that had nothing to do with my family's schedule or expectations. I booked the trip to Ireland I'd mentioned in my Facebook post. I put an offer on a small house with a garden, something I'd always wanted but never pursued because I'd been too busy managing everyone else's needs. The final piece of closure came in March, in the form of a letter from my father. Not an email or a text, but an actual handwritten letter delivered to my mailbox. Maya, it began, I owe you an apology that's about 5 years overdue. Your mother and I have been going to counseling since January, trying to understand how we got to this point with you. Our therapist helped us see some things we didn't want to face. We didn't lose you because of money. We lost you because we stopped treating you like our daughter, and started treating you like our solution to problems we didn't want to solve ourselves. We took your kindness for granted. We took your financial help for granted. Worst of all, we took your love for granted. I don't know if there's a way back from this, but I want you to know that we understand now why you had to walk away. You weren't the one who broke this family. We broke it long before you stopped trying to hold it together. I'm proud of the woman you've become, the boundaries you've set, the life you're building for yourself. I should have told you that years ago. If you're ever willing to have coffee with your old dad, I promise it will be about getting to know who you are now, not about asking you to go back to who you used to be. Love, Dad. I read the letter 3 times, feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. Not hope that everything could go back to the way it was, but hope that maybe, someday, we could build something new and better. 6 months later, I had that coffee with Dad. We met at a neutral cafe downtown, and we talked for 3 hours about my work, my travels, my goals for the future. He asked questions and listened to the answers. He shared stories about his own life, his own struggles, his own journey toward understanding the harm he'd caused. It wasn't a full reconciliation, but it was a beginning. Carmen and I exchange cordial text messages now, mostly about Tyler, who I see once a month for solo outings that don't involve the rest of the family. Jake and I have built a cautious friendship based on mutual respect, rather than financial dependency. The mountain cabin became a retreat I share occasionally with friends, but more often enjoy alone. I've turned it into a place of genuine peace, rather than performative family harmony. But the most important thing I learned through all of this wasn't about my family at all. It was about me. I learned that being kind doesn't require being a doormat. I learned that love isn't supposed to be transactional. I learned that you can't control how people treat you, but you can control whether you accept it. Most importantly, I learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do, for yourself and for others, is to stop enabling dysfunction and start requiring respect. My name is Maya, I'm 32 now, and I've finally learned the difference between being needed and being valued. It took losing a family I thought I had to find the family I actually deserve. And for the first time in my adult life, when I look in the mirror, I see someone who belongs exactly where she is.